everybody, it's Leo with Family Heritage Living. It is really super cold today, and so I am making a pot of goulash, or Hungarian goulash, and I just wanted to share the recipe with you. This is just a base recipe because, like with chili and veggie soup, there are so many different variations in it. So it really goes with your taste and your preference. Today's recipe I am using is what my mother made when I was growing up. It's real plain and basic. I'm going to go over a couple things as I make it and give you a couple hints if you got a picky eater, how to enhance the flavor without letting them know that you have done something they probably would reject. I'm not going to give specific measurements because cooking should be an experience that is based on your taste and based on what is in your pantry. Baking and cooking are kind of two different things. With baking, you do need a little bit more instruction with measurements, but cooking, especially soups and stews, it's a flavor thing. And it's what you have in your pantry, because one recipe may call for something you don't have, but you should always feel confident to substitute it with something that you can find in order to still create a similar recipe. So I am browning my hamburger, and I'm adding my fresh onions to it. Onions really help in flavoring stews and soups. Now, if you have a picky eater that does not like onions, that find onions once they've been cooked to be slimy and reject them, not necessarily because of flavor, but because of the texture, and that's usually what someone will reject onions for, is the texture, you can use onion powder, or you can use dehydrated onions. First, I would recommend, if you have an extremely picky eater, onion powder. You would put that in at the time that you have everything simmering, because it would basically cook out. You might be able to put a little bit in your hamburger while you're browning it, but if you drain the grease off your hamburger like I do, you would lose a lot of the flavor from it. If you're using dehydrated onions, I would use those when you are both browning your burger, and I would also put some into your water that you boil your noodles in. They lose a lot of flavor in the water. However, if you put too many in your burger, they don't always soften up, and you get these chewy, hard bits that are not very attractive to eat. Okay, so I've browned my burger, and I have cooked my noodles. Now, I cook my noodles in water, not in the broth, because noodles, when you cook them, they take longer to boil. They're going to absorb a lot of the broth. I mean, it's not that you couldn't cook them in your goulash broth, but I recommend doing it in water, draining it, and then adding your broth and putting stuff back on to simmer. All right, and I'm just putting my burger right in there, right in with my boiled noodles. All right, and then I'm going to add my tomatoes. I use tomato juice. Like I said, this is what I grew up with. There are substitutes. You could substitute beef broth for half of the tomato juice. That does flavor it up nicely. One thing that we love to add, half of us love to add, is rotel, which is chilies and diced tomatoes. And if you can, they can be your own or they can be store-bought. I do not add them regularly though, because I have 3 eaters that cannot, they can't digest them. All right, so we like it a little juicy. I might end up adding even more tomato juice than this, or I might even do a jar of beef broth at this point. Then the spices I use just for the base is I put in salt, paprika, and even though I put an onion in it, I'm still using onion powder, because onion powder just flavors real nice a soup like this. You can use beef stew, you can use venison, pretty much any meat you want. I've just always mainly used hamburger. There you have it. So the other thing that we like to do is I like to make enough so that I have a meal for the next day. And if that, usually because it sits overnight, the noodles soak up a lot of the juice. We love to have open face goulash sandwiches, and that's just a fresh moist piece of bread with butter on it, warmed up goulash, and put the goulash on top. So, if you're familiar with the spaghetti sandwich, and it's a wonderful meal. We hope you enjoyed this recipe. Please be sure that if you enjoyed it to like, subscribe, and share. If you have not already, please feel free to share this on your social media outlets. That really helps us and gets folks to our channel that otherwise would not know. So we appreciate you viewing. You folks have a good evening, and we will talk soon. God bless.